It is my privilege to introduce the first Into Action quarterly out-of-town speaker from Billings, Montana's recovery group, John S.
I feel like I've been set up. My name is John Scott, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, John.
I've been sober since December 19th, 1982, and I'm a member in good standing of the recovery group, which is a very sick bunch of people in Billings. And if you're ever along that part of the country, ever around in that part of the country, come see us. My name and number is in the phone book, and I was told it better be if I'm going to be an active member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And hearing somebody talk, we went to eat today at a little restaurant here just a few minutes ago. We pigged out. I just love eating right before I talk. This talk may not last very long. I have a little stomach problem here lately. I think it's nerves. I don't know why you'd be nervous in a meeting of a bunch of derelicts and drunks like we are, but it still happens. I hear this voice, and I know this woman. I knew who it was. It was some sick people from Montana. And Jason and Jeanette, just really glad to see you. It's just absolutely a blessing. You guys have been a blessing in my life. A sick blessing, but a blessing. And Mike, I don't know what happened that weekend. It was like a weekend from hell. You know, it's like you show up, when you get to talk at different places, every once in a while, you know, you just get to a place that's like, you get off the airplane, they take you to the hotel room, and they drop you off, and it's like, that's it. After you're done, somebody picks you up, and you go back, if you're lucky. Sometimes you get there, and there's nobody to pick you up. That's always an interesting deal, but this weekend that we was at was just a blast, and I'd never met Mike before, and we just hit it off right off the bat, and he's been a blessing in my life, and his lovely bride has allowed us to stay in her house a couple of times, 3 or 4 times now, and they're just good friends. They've just become quick friends like this, and I think the reason that happens is because there's a lot of people in Alcoholics Anonymous I wouldn't drink with, but there's a lot of them in here that I really would. And there's some people in here that have become really grateful for what's happened to them, and they show it through their actions. You know, it's one thing to talk about being grateful. It's a totally different thing to show it in your actions. And I was taught early on by some really good people in Alcoholics Anonymous who were grateful for what had happened to them in their lives, and that it's just been a fantastic trip, and I have had people that I could look up to for guidance and direction and the things I need to do. And I asked Mike tonight what he'd like for me to talk about, and he says, well, just talk about the basics, which is basically what everybody talked about, you know, and that's kind of what makes the program of Alcoholics Anonymous work. Because I think for us, I mean, I don't know how you drink, but I was 2 at a time and keep them coming. I mean, I didn't have a few drinks and somebody push a pill at me and here say, take this, and I didn't ask if it hurt me or nothing. I just took it. You know, I'm a pig. I took everything I could get a hold of it just as fast as I could, and I always drank for effect. You know, I liked oblivion. You know, I liked it when you just finally just right before you just went into the land of Oz, and wake up 2 or 3 days later, and it's like, then you got, I hated that. Wake up 2 or 3 days later. It's like, first off, you got to figure out where you're at. And it's always, you reach and grab your billfold, and it's always empty. It's just the way, It's like, and then you got to figure out, what had happened, and you don't know. And you got to go ask people. But you got to ask them in such a way that they don't know that you don't know. I mean, you can't just say, I don't know where I've been the last 2 or 3 days. What happened? You don't do that. You say, well, did we have a good time? Or did you have a good time? Or, you get to talking to them, and hopefully they'll say something that kind of gives you. And that's what happened to me on the, I said my sobriety date was the 19th, but on the 18th, that's what happened to me. I woke up in a basement of a strange place, and I didn't know where I was at. I didn't know what had happened. I just knew I was probably in trouble again, because I usually was. At least I wasn't in jail. That was kind of good. And I, it's just another day. It's just this is happening all the time with me. And I'd been thinking that maybe I ought to quit drinking, but I just, it's, if I quit drinking, my head's going to fall off. I mean, I don't want to quit. People said, if you just learn how to control it, and I tried, but so I got to where I'd take these little white pills with the crosses on it, and that really helped a lot. I don't know if I controlled it, but I didn't black out so fast, and you could sometimes get a whole night in almost, and I didn't know that I had a disease called alcoholism. I thought that I'd had some marital problems and financial problems, and I didn't even know it, but I had some self-esteem problems and all. I mean, I had a lot of stuff going on that I didn't. It's like I don't know what it is about me. I'm the kind of guy who I live with myself, but I don't even know what's going on with me. It's like it's like you would think that you would know because you're there, but I've never really felt like I was too much in tune with what, I kind of like, I also really, really like it or I don't. It's like there's no, I was at a treatment center one time and they had this chart with all these smiley faces on it. I don't know if you guys have ever seen. There's all these smiley, he was anxious. I didn't know what anxious was. He was regretful. I had two speeds, good or bad. I liked you or I hated you. It was one or the other. I mean, you was also on my side or you was against me. I mean, there wasn't a lot of gray in my life. It was like black and white. This is the way it is, and I never really knew that, I didn't know that I was missing that other stuff. I have a secret weapon. It's this gray matter between my ears, and it tells me about what I know. And it may not be true, but I just know it. It's like I got in a fight one time with a banker. This is my first time I'd ever met this guy. I'm in ranching and farming, and we got the new banker, Hadn't met him before. We was at the bar. Me and this other guy had been out buying hay all day, which meant we bought us about a gallon of whiskey and we drove around and looked at hay. That's how you do it. Well, so-and-so's got some hay. Yeah, we'll call him next week, or that kind of a deal. It looked like it was good quality to me. And so we was a little lit to begin with, and then we get to this bar, this Northern Hotel. Northern Hotel is kind of where all the ranchers and farmers hung out. And this neighbor of mine who was looking for this hay with me all day, he says, "That's our new banker." Really? Well, let's send him a drink, At least he's a drinking man. That helps. You can't trust people that don't drink, And this was a good sign right off the bat, And I'd love to manipulate and con people, but bankers are always kind of top of the list. And so anyway, we sent him a drink, and boy, it's bad right off the bat. It's bad. Because he looked at us and didn't say hi or nothing, just kind of looked over there and kept talking. And didn't work, so we had to send him another one. And about 3 hours of us sending him drinks, and he's never replied, said hi, go to hell, or nothing. You're going, well, this is the way my mind works. I got to sell the farm now because I'm not going to be able to get refinanced. Have to move out of the country, sure as heck. It's just, and I haven't even moved. I'm sitting in this chair, and I've already moved to Texas or someplace, because I gotta get out of here because the disgrace that you're going to have when they find out that you're bankrupt, and about the time I was really starting to become depressed, my banker friend that I've never met gets up and comes over and sits next to me, and we start talking about sheep. Now, I ranched and farmed all my life. I ran a lot of cattle and I farmed a lot of ground, but I've never ever had anything to do with sheep ever, and we got in this fight about how you should run sheep and what you should do with them and how you should treat them and the different diseases that sheep have and the way that sheepdogs work and the way that you load them into trucks and all this stuff that I don't know. But I have this thing that it works. It just I don't know whether that was before the Discovery Channel, so I didn't hear it there. I don't know where I got it, And so I'm just floating along talking. We're just about ready to fight over this thing, it's the first time I've ever met the guy, and it's not going good. And so my friend is trying to pull me off this guy. He says, let's go eat. And that was, she was always, let's go eat. Let's, waste $100 drunk on a $5 meal. I just hated it, but, let's go eat. He's saying, so all right, so we'll go eat. So, but we had to drive probably 8-9 blocks, it was a long ways. And I got tired. I was in the back seat with this banker, and I just, how when you drink like I drink, you just get tired. It just hits you like that too. And just all of a sudden, and I laid right down in that banker's lap and just went to sleep. And I guess they went ahead and had supper without me. And oh man, the next day, you know how it is. That part, I kind of remembered part of that. And then I called my friend up, and he told me the rest, and it was not good. It was not good. So I remember getting up and going to that bank the next morning, and I walked in there, and I had my hat in my hand, and I said, boy, I got to tell you, I knew how to make amends a long time before I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. I said, I was really wrong. I shouldn't have done. Oh, he says, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It's all right. He says, we can probably still get along all right. So, all right. So anyway, what I didn't know about, I think it was about a year later, I'd been going to AA for about 6 months, and out of the blue, I looked up one night, and here comes this banker. He just got out of treatment. And I went over there, and I said, welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. It's really good to see you. And he says, well, I had a lot of trouble drinking. And I says, well, you remember that night that you and I got drunk? He says, yeah. I says, I got to tell you, I don't know nothing about sheep. And he says, John, I don't know nothing about sheep either. So, so that ought to kind of give you kind of the indication what kind of deck I'm playing with, And I can tell you a jillion stories like that. But the truth of the matter is what happened to me is I found myself on the 19th of December, 1982, in a place that I had gotten to, and I couldn't get out of it. I mean, you guys know what I'm talking about. You can't get out of it. It's like you don't even know what's wrong. I mean, other people tell you what's wrong, but you can't hear them. They say, you need to quit drinking. I don't need to quit drinking. I got other things. I mean, it's got to be something else. Hopefully it's something else. I don't want to quit drinking. I mean, drinking's the only thing that's ever given me any kind of relief in my entire life. And I never, I took for granted what was happening to me happens to everybody. I would sit there and Cindy would go to the bars with me every once in a while before we got to where we was at war with each other full time. And she would, she'd always buy these stupid drinks with the umbrellas in, and my deal was I just walk in, they knew me. I thought it's because they liked me, but it's because I just lived there pretty much, and I'd walk in there, and they'd say, 2 at a time, keep it coming, that's right, don't forget. And then they'd always have to ask her, and she'd, it's like a major decision. That. What, now that drink I had 19 years ago, what was, it was like, you're just, come on, order it, and finally she orders the drink with the umbrella in it, and all that stuff, and got lettuce and celery and a garden coming out of the middle of it, and I am just, I'm not crazy. I mean, I never, I always thought if you was a real alcoholic, you just kind of a little bit of foam coming out of your mouth, and you get to the bar and you got to have a drink. It never was like that for me, really. I just walk in and, give me 2 at a time and keep them coming. When I got thirsty, I'd just go get a drink. I didn't ever not have a drink as far as I can remember. I mean, there's one time that I quit drinking for 3 days, but maybe if I remember, I'll tell that story. But I better stick with the one I'm with right now about her and her drinking. I like to talk about her a lot. She would sit there and, they don't drink like we do, those other people, the normies or whatever they are. They get a drink and then they start talking to you, and then it's like you've already drank your 2 and you're waiting for her. You can't order because, it's one of those things that, you can't order because, see, I've got 2 that I drink already and she's still that far on the first one. That's mostly because the ice melted. And it's like, finally you have to drink that one. Then you get that one out of the way and now you can order another drink, And so now it's time to get a second drink. And maybe she drank that first drink. Maybe she got that one down. And then you order another one, and she says the darndest thing. She said, oh, I don't think I want any more. I'm starting to feel it. It's like, I don't know. I don't know what it is that you're starting to feel, but whatever it is, it ain't what I'm feeling. Drink past that feeling that you think you're getting and get over here to the feeling I'm starting to get. And she never could get that. When she would have 2 or 3 drinks, she would feel like she was out of control. When I have 2 or 3 drinks, all of a sudden it's like there is a weight coming off my shoulders. It is like I can breathe. I can relax. I feel a sense of ease and comfort that comes at once from taking those few drinks. And drinks that I see others taking with impunity. And what I didn't know whenever I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, that impunity meant having one or two drinks that she didn't really want in the first place. She didn't even like the effect produced by alcohol. The effect that she has with alcohol is an out-of-control experience. The experience that I have with alcohol is totally different. The experience that I have with alcohol is something that takes me to a place where I can breathe in and out. And I feel like I begin to feel like I'm a part of society. I feel like I'm comfortable in my own skin. And I don't feel that when I'm not drinking. When I'm not drinking, the longer I go without a drink, the more intense my life gets. The more anxious I become. The more worthless I feel. The more people say things to hurt me happens. You know, it's like, it's not like I really know that that's happening. It's just that my life begins to be more and more complicated. And I don't understand what was really going on until my sponsors pointed out the doctor's opinion in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Drinks I see others taking with impunity. I can remember telling Richard, my first sponsor, I just want to learn how to drink sociably. That's what I really want. He says, no, you don't. He always knew what I wanted, And he sold me a diesel car right after I asked him to be my sponsor. And he says, that's not what you want. He says, you would hate being a normal drinker. He says, can you imagine drinking about 3 drinks and quitting all the time? Never drinking past that? Not even if you really, really wanted to? He says, that's what they're doing. He says, they don't even want to drink. Normal drinkers have 1 or 2 drinks a year that they don't want in the first place. Now, that's not the kind of drinking that you and I want to do, that's for sure. We want to do the kind of drinking that after 2 or 3, 4, 5, 6 or 7, 8 or 12, we start going, hey, let's go to Texas and visit Mike. And you don't care, yeah, it's midnight, but what the hell, let's start now, And we're just gonna jump on that horse and ride until the wheels fall off. And I mean, who cares? And we're gonna get us a couple of cases and go, and it's too late to go to the state liquor store, so we'll just buy these, $25 bottles here. What the heck? It doesn't matter. It's only money. It's only chips. It doesn't matter. It's like life is easy. It's comfortable. It's, and I thought that that's what normal drinkers did, but that's not what normal drinkers do. Normal drinkers don't even think like we think. We think totally different. The book says that our problem is stuck in our head. It says our problem is in our minds. And it talks about that crazy thinking that we do right before we start drinking. And, I never thought about that. I always thought that I changed my mind. I really thought about it for a while. And, yeah, I know I said I was going to quit forever, but, doggone it, that's a long time. I think I'll just quit until, next year. And about 4 or 5 minutes goes by, next year is a long time. And I'm really glad that I quit now. And I don't think that I need to quit until next year. I think 6 months will be good enough. And, it's probably 8, 9, 10 o'clock by then. By 11 o'clock, I got it down to 5 days. By 11:15, I got it down to 5 hours. By about 11:30, I'm drinking. I just changed my mind. No big deal. And I didn't realize that what I was doing is one of the symptoms of alcoholism. I mean, it's, I quit. I think I quit. I think I changed my mind. I think I'll have a drink. Just every day. Every morning I wake up and say, I'm not going to do this again. I'm never going to do this again. And every day I do it again. And totally out of control, but it really wasn't out of control. If I really, really wanted to quit, I could probably do it right now. But I really don't want to. I'll quit tomorrow. I'm really good about quitting tomorrow. I quit tomorrow probably every day for a long, long time. And it just never really worked out. Usually her fault, because my life is upside down because of her. And it's amazing. It's amazing how that thought is. I mean, how that works, with us. And I just really didn't realize what I was up against. I thought that my problem was drinking. It looks like drinking. It smells like drinking. People talk to you about your drinking. But I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, and Alcoholics Anonymous says it's not about my drinking. It's about the way I think. It's the thought process prior to taking the first drink. And I just love that story, Jim's story in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. The car salesman talking about having a few words with the boss. He'd been sober for 6 times in a row, and they've been still working with this guy. And then he says he decided to try to, he went to work Tuesday, he says. And I always wonder what happened Monday. He's probably drunk Monday, and he says he went to work Tuesday, had a few words with the boss, probably about where the hell was you Monday. And, but it says it didn't go too bad. Reason it didn't go too bad, he still had his job. He didn't get fired, so it's all right. And the next thing you know, he said to go out in the country to sell a car. That's where I'd go. I'm going to go to the country, sell a car, sure enough. And then he says, I decided to go into this bar. I've been there several times since I've been working, since he's been sober, I think he says, don't he? And he's got to remember what he just said. He said he's been drinking 6 times in a row now, so he hadn't been sober very long. And, and decided to have a sandwich. Have a little sandwich with a glass of milk. Then you got to thinking, I have a sandwich, I have a full stomach, glass of milk, that'll coat your stomach. I tried that one too. That didn't work. And he says, put a little whiskey in it. And he says, I just thought it'd be all right. He said, it's just going to be okay. I'm going to put a little whiskey in my milk, have a sandwich. It's going to be okay. It's like drinking water and a beer. Water and a shot. Water and a beer. Water and a shot. Water and a shot. Water and a shot. Shot. That's how my experiment went. But anyway, he says, he decided to mix this milk with the whiskey, and he says the experiment went so well. I like that part. He says, right before he drinks it, he says, I vaguely sensed I wasn't being any too smart. I think that's one of the best lines in the book. Just kind of out of the, somewhere you shouldn't do that. He's like, yeah, I know, but you got to remember, I'm a little different. I have this, I got it. So it says, I vaguely sensed I wasn't being any too smart. And he says, but then he says, he took it, drank that. I says, so I decided to have another sandwich with another glass of milk, Put a little whiskey in it, please. And he says, that experiment went so well. He says, I just decided to have another. And it says, so off to the treatment center, Jim goes again. I mean, but that's the way it works. Except I never made it as long as Jim. I never got that far. I was in the country and I already had my booze there. I mean, I didn't worry about that kind of stuff, And like you was talking about, if I had to, I'd jump in my helicopter, I'd fly over the hill, and there was a bar there, and the guy's name at the bar was John Scott. He was the bartender. And if I did it just right, I could call John up. Of course, I was always into image management. I know none of you people do that, but and I would fly over about 5 or 6 miles, and I'd land right there in the doggone parking lot. And John would come out, and he'd have a towel over his arm like this, and he'd have a big tray, with a fifth of whiskey on top of a case of Coors Light beer. And he'd just come out there, and I mean, that's cool. That's cool. I mean, if you're a dirt farmer like me, that's good stuff. And I mean, the mileage you can get out of that goes, well, it's still getting, So, it's like amazing, And I'd go drink, and I drank and flew for years, and drive, and couldn't do motorcycles well though. I'd have a tendency to get on a motorcycle, I'd always lose my balance. Me and my father-in-law at the time, we'd been flying the helicopter around. We went fishing one day. Now, this is how I go fishing. Sometimes if I'm really lucky, I'll take a fishing pole, but that time I didn't. And we ended up someplace, got a little drunk of poo, and the next thing you know, we flew to see John Scott, and he come out with a case of beer, and my father-in-law was impressed over that one, I'll tell you. And the next thing you know, we finally landed in front of my hangar, and we had rode down there on this motorcycle. And we got back on the motorcycle, and we rode from about here to that chalkboard over there, and we fell over. And we get back up, and we'd go about that far again, and we'd fall over. And we did it again, and this time we made it to the highway, and I rode him plumb across the highway on his back, And there's one of these guys that worked for me at the time comes driving up and says, John, I don't know, but he says, I think if I was you, I'd get back in that helicopter. You're a lot safer up there than you are down here. And, that's just kind of some of the goofy things I did. But what was killing me wasn't the goofy things I did. What was killing me was there's this knowledge inside that I had begun to finally, it's like I think I was starting to see the truth about what was really happening to me. And I could see that inside I was everything that I despised. I couldn't be trusted about anything. I would lie to you when the truth would serve me better. I hated everything about myself, and therefore I hated you. I couldn't trust me, so I couldn't trust you. I was absolutely worthless, and I knew it. And I did not like me at all. I'd sit there and I'd stick a gun in my mouth and try to pull the trigger, and I couldn't even do that right, you know. And I can remember finally getting to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, and you guys started talking about the malady of alcoholism, about the pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization that happens to people like us. That once we get to the place where we can no longer tell the difference between true and false, that we finally get to a place of desperation where we're willing to do something different. There's a line in the book that says that we have to come to believe in the hopelessness and the futility of life as we've been living it. And I believe that if you do not get to that place, if you don't get to the place where you begin to believe in the hopelessness and the futility of life as you've been living it, that it's really, really hard to stay here. And I believe that I was very fortunate the day that I walked into Alcoholics Anonymous that I felt like that. I couldn't anymore tell you what I needed to do or how I needed to do, or I had ran out of options. I had been to doctors, I had been to lawyers, I had been to preachers. You know, a doctor says, you know, if you keep doing this, I had this little problem. I had a tendency to bleed on the inside, and he says, you know, you got to quit drinking. And he asked me how much I drink. Of course, you don't ever want to tell those people what's really going on. And he says, you know, you're going to have to quit drinking. You ain't going to make it. And I just, I thought, I got to get a second opinion. Just never got around to it, though. And we'd go to counselors. That was always fun. They pay them guys a little extra money to see it your way, but that never worked. Well, they fire you. They just get out of here. We don't come back. No, what do you say? I'll call you. Don't call me. And I never understood that really. And I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, and you guys talked the talk. The first night I was there, this guy named Richard, he asked me if I believed that I was responsible for my own actions, and I knew that the answer was yes, but I really, it's like, I believe it. But I knew he'd been talking to this guy named Frank who'd been talking to Cindy, and I knew that it's like I was in this trap. You better answer the right answer, or else they're not going to let you in this thing, AA. I said, I believe that I'm responsible for my own actions. And then I knew he'd been talking to Cindy because his next words were, good, maybe now you start acting like it. And I didn't know. I really did. I thought that the reason that he said that is because he'd been talking to Cindy. And she's always against me anyway. And I can remember that first night they told me that I needed a sponsor. And this guy named Johnny says, I'll be your sponsor. And Johnny was an auctioneer, and he told me to come to his house until I went to the house after the meeting, and he's at 2:00. He says for me to go home because at 2:00 in Billings the bars closed. So I went home, and the next morning we get hooked up again, and he says come on in, and I went in there, and that afternoon about noon, 2 more guys from the group show up, and they take me out to lunch, and after about 3 or 4 o'clock, 2 more guys show up, and they ended up sticking with me until the meeting started. And then after the meeting, I went out again to Johnny's house. And that's kind of what happened to me that first week that I was sober. And Johnny was, he talked about the things that can happen if you do Alcoholics Anonymous. And I was intrigued by what he was saying. And I was intrigued by Alcoholics Anonymous. I knew at first that you guys were all paid counselors. I just had that feeling, but after I'd been here for a while, there's a guy sitting next to me one night, about the 3rd or 4th night. His name was Tim. And I looked over at Tim, and Tim didn't look well. And there was guys in that group had 15, 20, 25, 30 years. And I remember asking Tim, I says, Tim, how long you been here? And he says, 2 weeks. Tim was nervous. And I said, 2 weeks? You haven't had a drink in 2 weeks, Tim? And he says, no. And there's something that happened. When Tim said that he hadn't had a drink in 2 weeks, I could lock into I could understand what Tim was talking about. 15, 20, 25 years. I mean, like, why? Why would you do that? I mean, I can understand, get the heat off, but 15 or 20 years, and it's like, I just don't understand why a guy would do that. See, I thought that drinking meant that sobriety meant for the rest of my life, I'm going to want to have a drink, and I'm not going to be able to have a drink. And that's what sobriety meant to me. And that's not what sobriety is. Sobriety means that I'm living the rest of my life, and I couldn't care less whether I had another drink. Drinking to me is not an option. Drinking will not add to my life. It only subtracts from my life. It has never added to my life. But I lived with the secret weapon, with the great illusion that my drinking was fun. And it was fun for a while, but it got to be where it was. I got so crazy drinking, I was getting to where I was willing to kill my wife and kids. That's how goofy I got. And it wasn't a passing thought. It was something that I lived with for about 6 months. It scared me to death. I was so afraid of doing that. I didn't want to talk to anybody about it because you can't go out there and talk to those normies about it. I mean, you get in here and you hear. The trouble is when you come into Alcoholics Anonymous, you hear stories that are, really, no, I never screwed a nun type of story, And, well, I guess I'm not. I thought I was almost qualified to be here, but I guess I'm not now, I never went to prison, should have. Everybody says should have, but I didn't. I didn't go to prison. I didn't even get a DUI. I got picked up a lot. I always talked my way out of them somehow. If I got picked up now, they'd throw me in jail for sure, But that was a different time. And, I sat there for a while, and I picked up on all the things I didn't do. But then something happened somewhere along the line, and I started picking up on things that I did do. I tell you kind of how it happened for me. There were some people in our home group. A guy named Rotten Ralph was an attorney, and he come by the name Honest, and there's a guy named Gerald. Gerald was a hillbilly, and Gerald he was the kind of guy that once he started talking in a meeting, it could be like 5 minutes after the meeting started, and if they called on him, he would talk until the meeting was over. Or if they called on him halfway through the meeting, he would talk until the meeting was over. If they called him 5 minutes before the meeting was over, he'd talk until about another 40 minutes past the meeting should have been over. He was, it's like child, and they'd always call on him too. And if he'd show up, oh man, here goes the night, And this Rotten Ralph guy, he'd be sitting there talking, and he would always pick on the new guys, the guys with the attitudes. I don't know why he's always picking on me, but he would sit there and he'd just hammer on you, and then when he'd get done, he'd pull $1 out of his pocket and say, now, if I really pissed you guys off tonight, he says, let me buy you your first drink. That's no way to treat a new guy. And then there's this guy named Nick. And Nick's favorite deal was, if you haven't been around here for at least 6-8 months, there's no need for me to remember your name. He says, you're just a visitor in AA. He says, I don't even want to fool with people that have been around here for 6 or 8 months. He says, I'm interested in people that are interested in long-term sobriety. He says, you stick around here 6 or 8 months, I might not learn your name. We'll see. And Nick me and this guy named Frank, we were both getting a divorce at the same time. At least I thought I was until I got a new sponsor. And, I was getting this divorce. And we'd be sitting there talking, and old Nick would come up behind us on the couch and say, well, pour me another drink, And there's this little gal named Millie. Millie is an old grandmother type lady and just a sweetheart. And she'd sit there and she'd always say, look at all the miracles. And I thought she was still seeing things, because I didn't. There's a gal named Margaret. Margaret was another, she wasn't very old. She was probably, I suppose, 40, something like that. And you'd call Margaret, and Margaret would say, my name is Margaret, and I'm an alcoholic. And them that go to meetings, stay sober, and them that don't. Thank you. And I go, what the, what kind of, why did they even call on her? And you call on her for 6 months from now, and she go, my name is Margaret, and I'm an alcoholic, and them that go to meetings, stay sober, and them that don't. Thank you. I thought, what a lame message. This woman why do they even call on her? I mean, there's people that have, there's new girls and guys that you need to hear from, not Margaret. I mean, Margaret don't have a message, Of course, the longer I'm here, that's a great message, But, and I kind of had an attitude, I know, and I thought, one night I'm going to teach that doggone old Nick. He's not remembering my name, but by golly, after tonight, he's going to remember my name. So I go up to him in my most humble way, I said, Nick, do you have a few minutes? This is after the meeting. There's about 8 or 10 people around, having coffee and talking. He says, sure. So we sit down, and I just start just laying it on just as thick as I can about how my wife has screwed me over for the last umpteen years and all this kind of stuff. And he just, in the middle of us, it's just like when I thought starting to make some kind of connection with this old fool. It's like all of a sudden he jumps up and he says, "So you're an alcoholic. Now what the hell are you going to do about it?" There's people around, and he's yelling at me. It's like, this is it. I've had enough. I can't stand this anymore. And I remember, now Nick's an old crippled man. He's had cancer at the time. I didn't even know it, but I'm trying to head for the door, and there's a refrigerator in this hallway, and you got to get past this to get out the front door. And he's meeting me there, and he pushes me up against the refrigerator and says, "Now listen, kid." He says, "You're wasting my time." He says, "You're wasting your time, and you're dang sure wasting those people's time." He says, "You're trying to get drunk. Get out of here and get drunk. That's what you're trying to do." And out of nowhere comes this rotten Ralph right over his shoulder. He says, "And let me buy your first drink. And let me buy your first drink." And I'm going, this ain't no way to treat a new. It's like you just wave out there. My face is heating up, and just as I go outside, I get in this new diesel car that my sponsor sold me. I'm going to spin gravel and go, and I'm just absolutely crazy about what's going on. And I'm driving down the street, and I'm honking the horn. I'm yelling at the top of my voice. And I live out in the country. I'm living out in the country 30 miles. I'm having to drive out there. And I'm thinking about how these guys don't know how to treat a new guy. These guys are rude and crude, and they don't know about alcohol. You hear about kind and tolerance is our code, and they're not. There's this guy named, talking about Gerald, this guy from Louisiana or someplace, he ended up in our nut ward in state nut house over where you come from. And he was over there for a while, and then he gets out and he shows up at our group, and he comes to me one night. He said something about me having a bad attitude, and because every time he'd say, "How you doing tonight, John?" I say, "Well, terrible. Hate my wife, hate God, hate you, hate AA," and all that kind of stuff. And he said, No, you're not going to do that no more. You've been doing that for a while. You may do that to these other people, but from now on, you're not going to do that to me. He says, "Whenever I come up to you and I ask you how you're doing, John," he says, "you're going to say, 'Why, Gerald, I'm getting better in every way, every day. Thank you very much.'" Honesty program, and they're making you lie right off the bat. I can remember I'm driving, and I'm screaming, and I'm honking the horn, and I'm going crazy. You got Gerald out there, Rotten Ralph, Nick, them guys there. They don't care. They don't care. They don't care if they run a new guy off. I'm a sensitive new guy. And I can remember just, and something happened to me on the way home. Thank God I had to drive as far as I did, because I got to thinking, well, I am an alcoholic. What am I going to do about it? And I knew that I had to go back. Now, where do you go? I don't know where else to go. I've tried the church. There's nothing left. Where do you go? At least these guys knew whenever I told them that I was going crazy, they'd just laugh at you. "Yeah, I know what you're talking about. No, I'd almost kill myself. Yeah, heck yeah. Look at here, look at the marks. It just never helped. The trouble in AA is every time you talk to somebody about your grave emotional, deep psychological problems, there's always somebody sitting next to you. "Oh, shoot, listen to this." It's like, oh, geez, I tell my sponsor Richard, I was telling him, my wife, I hate her guts, and I can't stand her, and all this kind of stuff. And he says, "Well, at least, John, you'll be able to make amends to yours. Mine's dead." It's like you couldn't win. Have you noticed that? He says, "It doesn't matter who you sit next to, it's always worse." I remember thinking, this is it. Somehow I knew that this was it. This is where I was going to get better. And I can remember a couple of days later, and I was driving back I've been to a couple of meetings, and I was going back again, and I was thinking, God, I got to see Rotten Ralph and Nick, Nick, you poor me, and these guys, and Gerald, Gerald, how you doing, Gerald? Or how you doing, John? "Well, Gerald, I'm getting better in every way, every day. Thank you very much." And it dawned on me I was. It dawned on me at a level that I had never felt before. And And I started to pick up on some of the things that was happening in Alcoholics Anonymous, and things started to change for me just a little bit. We were talking about getting the ego out of the way. The ego got out of the way just long enough that I could feel a little light. Things changed. Still getting a divorce, though, I want you to know. By this time, my first sponsor, Johnny, had gone out and gotten drunk. I'd been sober for about 45 days, and he got mad at his group and got mad at his sponsor and got drunk. There's nothing new around this bunch. That's what we do. And I was kind of had a little resentment because I didn't get to pick my first sponsor. They appointed me Johnny, and I thought, that little blonde, I've been looking at her. She got what I want, and I can remember going to that meeting, and I'm walking across the room to ask her to be my sponsor, and Richard come out of nowhere, says, John, he says, I understand your sponsor's gone. I says, yeah, that's what I hear. He said, well, I'm going to be your sponsor now. I said, well, Gerald, or Richard, I'm not even sure if I want you to be my sponsor. Oh, he says, I didn't ask you whether or not you wanted me to be your sponsor. He says, I'm going to be your sponsor. And it's like, I didn't even get to pick. Here it goes again. I don't get to pick. And he says, by the way, he says, how's your marriage working? Well, I know that, see, Richard sponsored Frank, and Frank was a good friend of mine, and I know that Frank had been telling Richard about me and Cindy getting his divorce. And anyway, I knew he knew, but I told him, I said, well, I'll tell you what, I'm getting a divorce. He says, well, let me get this straight. Are you the one that's getting a divorce, or is she getting a divorce? And I says, I'm getting a divorce. He says, well, you'll quit that right now. I said, wait a minute, I'm living with a crazy woman. Do you realize that it wasn't more than about 60 days ago that I took a double-barrel shotgun? I was going to blow her brains out. I went around the corner of the building there, and she was beating on where she thought I was in bed, beating on the wall. She said something about birds flying around, just trying to kill me with this hangover. And I got this shotgun out, and we hadn't been seeing eye to eye for quite some time. And I thought, this is how it's going to happen. I'm going to walk out there and say, boy, he's trying to kill these birds, and I just tripped and fell and got her accidentally, and that's kind of, just my luck, I loved her dearly. And of course, I've been telling everybody for about a year I'm going to kill the witch. And the next thing you know, I'm sitting there with this double-barrel shotgun stuck right at her nose, and she goes, this is what I live with. She goes, well, pull that trigger, get the hell out of the way. And pushes it aside and walks on past me. And I go, I was just crazy. I live with this goofy woman like this. I told Richard about it. He says, crazy? Hell yeah, she's got to be crazy. Anybody live with you for 13 years got to be plumb out of her mind. She's got to be crazy. But he says, I'm going to tell you something. He says, don't you tell her this, but I'm going to tell you something. She is sicker than we are. Yeah? He says, yeah. He says, you know why? He says, you know why I can tell you that? He says, because for the last 13 years, you've gotten some kind of relief from time to time. You've been able to get drunk. She's done it cold sober that entire time. She's got to be plumb out of her tree. But don't you tell her that. Got in that diesel car, ran back out that ranch. Cindy gets what Richard said. I couldn't even wait. But he says about this divorce, he says, you're not going to get a divorce. He says, in AA, we don't make any sudden changes for at least a year. And he says, you ain't even got close to that. He says, we're not going to make any sudden changes. He says, you don't know how to have a relationship. You're with her right now. We're going to work on it because you're right there with her. And he says, besides that, he says, we got the two of you confined right now. He says, you know what, if you guys separate, within a short time there'll be 4 of you, and then there'll be 6 of you, and then there'll be 8 of you. He says, right now we got you together, so let's just keep it right there. He says, it's a lot better for society in general. So anyway, we didn't get this divorce. And you know what happened to me after I'd been here for about 5 or 6 months? She hadn't even hardly gone to a meeting, and she got better. It was just amazing how that worked. He started telling me what to do. He says, you're going to tell her that you love her. Honesty program again. They're making me lie again, and I can remember, telling him, well, I don't want to do it. He says, I don't care whether you want to do it. Just do it. He says, what you want, he always knew what I wanted. He says, what you want is a relationship that has some kind of weight and depth to it. He says, and you're not going to get it living the way you've been living. You're going to have to change the way you live in order to get what you want. And he says, you're going to have to quit that kind of stuff. He says, you're going to go home and tell your lover. But for a guy like you, you're a liar. He says, and because you're a liar, he says, you're going to have to show her that you love her. And for you, it's going to have to be something really spiritual, like cleaning up the garage or washing the dishes or cleaning out the garbage or picking up the messes that you make. He says, those are the kinds of things that you need to do. And he says, you never tear her down in public or in private. You always build her up. He says, you start doing that. He says, she will change right in front of your very own eyes. And she did. She did. I'd have killed the wrong woman. I'd have shot the wrong guy. Because what I found in Alcoholics Anonymous is a way of life that I didn't even know existed. I didn't understand that what I had just fell into was the most phenomenal thing that's ever happened to me in my entire life. There is nothing that I could think of that's going to come any closer to changing my life like Alcoholics Anonymous. It's taken a person who was absolutely broken, with an ego that wouldn't quit, with a brain that just knows it all, and it took me to a place where I was beginning to learn things about things that I never even knew existed. I got to a place where I was willing to hear and see what could happen right here in front of me. You know, this is the most fantastic thing that's ever happened to me, bar none. And you know what? For years I tried to leave here. I tried to leave here because I thought my job was to get sober and to get out. And that just doesn't work. We were talking about that tonight. You know, after I was sober for 4 years, if you think that our marriage just fell together and everything was wonderful, you're wrong. After 4 years, 3 years, after 3 years, I found myself on the edge of a divorce still. She hated me, and I'm not liking her much. I mean, we were just kind of together because we were together, you know. My sponsor, Richard, had left. He'd gone back to California. Had a little problem with his marriage. I think he started listening to what he was telling me, and it worked out. He ended up getting her moving back to Montana a little later. But, you know, I found that after 3.5 years of sobriety, I was right there on the verge of bankruptcy. I had this banker that I was telling you about. Me and him got together and had a great alcoholic plan. And we come up with this way that we could buy about $2.5 million worth of property with no visible means of support. And after we got it bought, they fired him. it's like, and you're out, me. so for the next 2 or 3 years, I'm sitting there just hanging on by the fingernails. And there was a guy who was an accountant who worked, who was a part of our home group, and he helped me through that period of time, and we were able to fight it off. I didn't declare bankruptcy. I didn't want to declare bankruptcy, and we fought it off. And it lasted forever, it seemed like, you know, and it seemed like I've been a good boy. I've been going to AA. I haven't drank. I haven't messed around. I should be getting, you know, it's like they used to say in my home group, well, John, you're getting the gifts now, huh? You know, yeah, my wife's trying to get rid of me, and my banker's trying to get rid of me, and and I'm a failure, it seems like, in AA, because people in AA are talking about God working for them. And God ain't working for me. I mean, I talk to you about it. I tell a new guy that it's working for me, but it's not. It's like, I don't even really know if I believe in God. I believe in AA, I believe in the group, but I don't know if I really believe in God. Now, I found myself about 3.5 years just absolutely just crazy. I found myself at 3.5 years sticking a gun back in my mouth again, wanting to blow my brains out because I am a loser. I can't even make it in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm in AA for 3.5 years. My wife is leaving. My banker wants to get rid of me, and I don't even believe in God, really. Not really. And something, again, changed. I went through a period of time there. I ended up getting Jimmy Shaw for a sponsor and insisted that I do things and not do things, and started getting back to basics and just doing, working with other people, getting involved in other people's lives. See, I was a taker and a user. I come to Alcoholics Anonymous so that you can get me better. And that don't work. That's not how this thing works. It works whenever I see if I can get you better. And it doesn't matter how sick I am. I can always find somebody sicker than me. Around here, it's not been that hard. And you get with somebody who's not doing well, and you put your arm around him and see if you can improve his quality of life by maybe just going to meetings or doing whatever. You don't have to sponsor them. You just have to be involved in their life. And the next thing you know, your life gets decent. And I went and talked to a guy about this period of time. By the way, that guy who would save my bacon with the finances, he was about 9 years sober at that time, and he didn't go to meetings for the next, 6-8 years. And I kept asking Vince. I said, Vince, come on, let's go to a meeting. No. I need to go, but I'm not going to go tonight. And Vince ended up drinking again, and Vince never got sober. He eventually had the wet brain and stuck him in an old folks' home. And not too long ago, Vince just died, and he never made it back. And he's just one of hundreds. Most of us don't make it because of the secret weapon, because of the thought process prior to taking the first drink. because we're here for 3.5 years or 5 years or 18 years and we're not getting it. And I think what has to happen for a person like me is I have to begin to see what's happening in here. And this to me is a manual on sponsorship, and it tells me what to do and what not to do. It talks about working with other people. It talks about those guys, Bill and Bob, when they first got sober, they threw themselves frantically into helping other alcoholics. And what happens when you do that is an amazing thing. A transformation happened in my life, and I began to feel better about, whenever I'm telling you about how you should be treating your wife, amazing thing happens. When I go home, I treat my wife kind of like, I start taking my own advice, and I start treating her like she's important. And she begins to be important. If I treat her like she's not important, she's not important. It's the same way with AA, You go to AA meetings and it's your home group and you treat it like it's not important. How long do you think you're going to get to stay there? You'll take yourself out in no time at all. But if you go to your home group and you make it the best home group that you can possibly be, you will find yourself in love with the people that you're with. And when you get to that point, this thing gets really good. It really gets good. And it just gets bigger and broader and wilder and better, because what happens, the more I do that, the more I get rid of me. The more I get rid of me, the better life is. The better things are. The more I see God working in your life, the more I believe in me. And I believe in God. I believe that God's working through me. I'm not God. He works through me. And it's like I pick up on the message a little bit. It talks about in the 12th step, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we carry this message to other alcoholics. To have a spiritual awakening is fantastic, but those things are locked in time. What happens to us when we have a spiritual awakening, we find ourselves, it's like going to Christmas. It's like Christmas. We're all excited about Christmas. We're going to open the presents and everything's wonderful. And, you go in there and you open the presents and that day is great. But a week from now, or 2 weeks from now, or 3 weeks from now, we can't even remember what Uncle Joey sent us. We can, obviously it wasn't important, but at the time it was. And that's kind of what happens with the spiritual experience or spiritual awakening. Those things are locked in time. And the further away from them we are, the harder it is to remember that God has been very, very good to us, at least to me. And what happens to me when I'm working with you is like an ongoing series of spiritual experiences or spiritual awakenings. I see them in your life. You were one big time. You are too. I seen this gal when she wasn't doing too hot. I believe me, she needs Alcoholics Anonymous. Like I do. It's a fantastic deal. Once I get to the place where I begin to, and the reason that you're doing so well, everywhere I go, there you are. And it's like, well, why do I have to put myself out? It's like I've done my. It's like one old timer told me one time, I have done my sentence. And if Alcoholics Anonymous is a sentence to you, I've got to tell you something. You're not working the program. You're in here, you're a taker. And if you're taking, you can't stay. Takers do not get to stay in Alcoholics Anonymous. You have to become a giver. Once you become a giver, you get to stay. And not only do you get to stay, but the burden is light. And it's exciting. And it's fun. And I want to be around people that feel like that and act like that, because it's contagious. The more I'm around those kind of people, the more my life improves. The more that I work with guys who are having trouble with their marriages, the better Cindy's life is. Or their children, or their finances, or whatever it is. You reap what you sow. You reap what you sow. You can't seed tomatoes and get avocados. It doesn't work like that. If I seed hatred and fear and anger and resentment and guilt and self-pity, that's what I'm going to get. That's how come when you're in that frame of mind, and I don't know if you're like me, but even today I can get in that frame of mind and I'm sowing it out there, and I can't understand how come everybody around me treat me like I'm some kind of a, can't say it behind the podium, but one of them, But on the other hand, if I really begin to be concerned about your well-being, and I begin to be concerned about my sponsor and his home group and Alcoholics Anonymous as a whole, it all changes. It just changes, don't it? So I'm gonna keep coming back, because the more I give, the more I get, and it's a trap. The more you get, the more you want to give. It's a phenomenal deal. And if you're new tonight and you're just sitting there, That's not going to happen for me. This is not. It's like Chamberlain said. This is not like lightning hitting you. This is not like lightning hitting you. You do what we do, and you will get what we get. Hang around with the people who are actively involved in your sobriety and their sobriety and other people's sobriety, and you're going to get the promises that are outlined in the first 164 pages of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I don't know. Are we out of time? Are we close? We've got 6 minutes left. We've got 2.6 minutes left. I want to thank you guys for having me here. I'm really tickled to be here. I'm tickled to be anywhere in Alcoholics Anonymous. I really am. Alcoholics Anonymous is, Cindy and I have been married now, 34 years. And 13 of those years we lived in hell pretty much. And a couple of years after we got into Alcoholics Anonymous wasn't wonderful. But I tell you what, she is my best friend. She has absolutely been my best supporter. And I'd have ran her off because I know. I'd have quit Alcoholics Anonymous more than once because I know. And it's because of people like you in rooms like this. And I don't care how new you are. Sometimes the newest guy helps me more than... It's just like the guy I was talking to you about, the one that's 2 weeks. I mean, that guy connected with me in a way that no older guy could connect with me that day. And I knew he knew what I was going through. And I knew he'd bought the great lie about Alcoholics Anonymous that you could quit drinking. And thank God I did too. So thank you very much.